Hi, I'm Jackie Bernard, Programs Assistant at Uncle Don's Cabin Historic Site, the home of Josiah Henson. And I am so excited to share with you a series of videos we filmed called Discovering Don. The short videos are a look at the contributions that African Canadians have made to the development of my hometown, Dresden, Ontario. The town was a final destination for hundreds of refugees from American slavery. We had the pleasure of working with local historian Marie Carter.
Well, Jackie, I've got you in a very familiar place here, haven't I?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, didn't you teach Sunday school here?
I did.
For a number of years?
And brought my children up here in this church congregation. Yes, I did.
Yeah, and all that time, I'm really curious, did you know that this was the oldest church in Dresden?
No, I did not.
And that it has, underneath of this slightly modern exterior, here's actually the original building that was built by Reverend Newman and Reverend Samuel Henry Davis, who were originally missionaries at the British American Institute.
Oh, interesting. Yes, again, in fact, I did not know.
And we've actually kind of gotten to the point now where Ontario Heritage has recognized this as an Ontario Heritage Site because of its historic significance and its links to the British American Institute.
So this was put here by Ontario Heritage Trust?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And anyway, so it accredits Reverend Newman and Reverend S.H. Davis as the founders of this church. So do you know very much about Reverend Newman, the founder here?
Actually, I don't, but I'm sure that you will be able to fill me in.
Well, he has some wonderful connections to you at the Uncle Tom's Cabin because of your celebration of the British American Institute there. He was actually one of the original teachers of the British American Institute. And he was educated in Oberlin, Ohio, which was also the alma mater of Reverend Wilson, who was one of the people who partnered with Henson in the creation of the British American Institute. And so Wilson tended to bring other fellow alumni from Oberlin, Ohio to teach at the school, and Newman was one of them. So he started out as a teacher, taught briefly at the Institute, and then became part of the management committee there. And he served in that capacity, I think as secretary actually, until about 1849. And then he returned to Cincinnati, where he became an ordained Baptist minister and part of the Baptist Free Mission Association's outreach to the population here in Dresden. And when he first came back, he actually was part of a team, including himself and the Reverend Samuel Henry Davis. Davis is interesting as well because he comes from the Second Baptist Church in Detroit, which was one of the main stations on the Underground Railroad. So you can see the connections these men have to that whole story of the Underground Railroad. But anyway, their main focus when they were here was education and spiritual uplift. And so it was really quite fitting that they had the control of the church and school, while Henson and one of the other trustees were handling more of the other aspects of the Institute. So unfortunately that came to an end when Reverend John Scoble came on the scene in about 1853, and the Baptists were evicted from the church and school on the Institute property, and they moved here just over the line from the British American Institute to this site. I'm sorry, not right away to this site. First they had a mission that they held from the main street of the town, but then one of the parishioners, George Johnson, he sold them this property, and by 1857 they built this church. And so this church has been here ever since. And the original church that was built by the congregation is still underneath of the siding here of this church. So it's really quite remarkable to think that that work of those early pioneers is still here as a legacy to this congregation, and that this congregation is very much a legacy of their early mission work. And missionary work was such an important part of what Dawn was all about, because there were actually 15 missionaries that used Dresden as their base, Dresden Dawn as their base, and some of them owned property around Dresden and then did their outreach work out into the county. The thing is that was J.C. Chambers, one of those missionaries, reported quite early on, about 1859. He's kind of a late arrival. He comes at that time and finds that all the good mission work has been taken up by all these other people. So Jackie, I want to show you something really interesting here. if you come out here to the street with me, and this is Queen Street in Dresden, and this is actually about a half a block outside of the British American Institute. The Institute border would have been just on the other side of the church here. And you see, if you look down this street, you see we have the Baptist Mission here. We have Christ Church Anglican, which is the Episcopal or Church of England outreach. And then on the next corner, we have the Reverend Josiah Henson's BME Church. And so you see there's a real indication of the missionary work that's going on here that is beyond what was happening at the British American Institute, and happened at that time when the Institute was no longer fully functioning. And so all these churches and these mission groups began to take up the slack. And quite interestingly, by the time J.C. Chambers arrives in 1859, which is about 2 years after this church was built, Chambers reports that it's a very crowded mission field altogether. And Chambers himself buys a farm just outside of town, right next to Reverend Thomas Hughes and some of these other missionaries. And he's intent on doing mission work at Dresden, but finds that he can't get enough of a congregation because there's so many people that are doing this work that he's not really got a very good chance of being able to do this. So he does teach briefly in Dresden and does some mission work in Dresden, but then begins to do outreach to other areas. And these missionaries that were at Dresden quite frequently were going to Chatham Township, Dover Township, something called Yee's Ferry, which you'd know today as Kent Bridge, and Don Mills area. And so this became kind of like almost a staging area with people moving out to do this mission work in this broader area. So this becomes a very important legacy of the Don settlement, where they have this really important work going on that is doing outreach to other people beyond the immediate area. And that's really important considering Chambers was ministering to people outdoors with no church building, because the congregation that he was serving were very poor. They were the people that were coming in and doing sharecropping work, or they would come in and do a contract to clear a piece of land, or they would be caught in this kind of reality where people would come in, improve a property, and then have it sold out from under them or have the owner take back over once the property was in the kind of shape that it needed to be in to farm. And so they were very transient, they were very poor, and had no resources, so could not build a church like, you know, the Reverend Newman and Reverend Davis's congregation could. But that tells us all the more how important these surviving churches are as a reminder to us of the legacy of mission work out in the Don settlement.